Could Jacksonville get an aquarium? The uncertainty of what will replace the Jacksonville Landing is reviving an effort to bring an aquarium to downtown Jacksonville. Our Juliette Dreyer shows us what it would look like and the amount of people it could draw here to the First Coast.
It's one of the most iconic places in Jacksonville, but how much longer will the Landing be around and what will be there next? Could it be a park? Or could something like this soon fill the skyline?
It was an immediate light bulb that really came off. Wow, that would be an awesome opportunity.
For years, Erica Cepega and the organization AquaJax have been trying to gain support for an aquarium in downtown Jacksonville. Their sights initially set on the shipyards until
it is a perfect location.
The mayor and the owners of the Landing cleared the way to demolish and eventually redevelop the property.
Having the Jacksonville Landing kind of open up as an opportunity is really amazing.
Since 2014, AquaJax has been raising awareness of their effort, but now they're ramping it up.
People travel all around the world just to go see aquariums. So to have something that's iconic, something that can bring people to our downtown would really be amazing.
A feasibility study for the aquarium estimates it would draw more than 800,000 visitors each year, though Cepega calls that a conservative estimate. That means tourists spending money in Jacksonville in addition to jobs created.
So I would love to see a big, large, open area right here to have a lot of manatees.
The aquarium would operate in partnership with the Jacksonville Zoo and Gardens.
The marina right there with the boats going back and forth between the Jacksonville Zoo,
which makes the riverfront location ideal. Cepega says they plan to express interest in the property to the city in the coming days, but only time will tell whether this dream becomes a reality. At the Jacksonville Landing, Juliette Dreyer, First Coast News on your side.